do you want to chat about how you go through an acquisition? What do you look for?
So I'm going to slice up the question a little bit. I think that, so how do you pull off an acquisition, right? That really depends on what you're trying to acquire. What I consider to be kind of DEFCON 4, or the toughest thing to acquire, and let's level the playing field here for a second. Let's say that you are, young in your career, you want to make the jump into, being an entrepreneur. You don't necessarily have, the next greatest widget that you want to commercialize, and that's the business. You're open to acquiring another company and maybe looking at scaling that. And you're looking for opportunities, let's say in the lower middle market or the micro cap market of M&A. And on top of that, Sunday, the cherry is you have no money and you want to acquire a company. So how the hell are you going to pull that off? The truth is that for most of the acquisitions that I've ever made, I've never used a penny of my own capital. And so this starts to bring in this concept of really understanding finance. And this is as large of a theme, if not larger, than any of the other skill sets required. For me, it's in chemicals, whether or not I'm a great formulator or chemist or so on and so forth, or whether I'm a great operator for chemical facilities. And this can be parlayed in whether you're running apparel or beverage or whatever you're going to do in your life. This notion of really understanding how finance works and really understanding how the credit markets work. Just a light example. Let's describe this scenario by way of example. Let's say we're going to go and we're looking to buy a dry cleaner. We think that we're going to run the next best dry cleaner, and I want to get one, and then I'm going to open up 10 other, and I'm going to start a dry cleaning empire. But I want to start by making an acquisition, and I have no money. So let's say we identify one for sale. And the first thing that you want to be able to do is really be able to present an offer to the seller that you believe is rational. And how you build that rationale is by having some interaction with the seller in getting a sense of what the revenues of that business are and what the net income is. And if you can get that sentiment early on in the process, that will give you a ballpark to be able to go in and make an offer. So let's say it does $1 million a year, and let's say it throws off $100,000 of net income. If the seller says, well, I want to sell the business for $1 million, which is a 10-time multiple on the $100,000, you may look back and say, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. That doesn't meet, my valuation requirements. It also would not meet a bank's valuation requirements to lend you that amount of capital to buy the business. So that would be a non-starter. But let's say he came back and he said, you know what, I want 500,000. It's a 5-time multiple. Most banks, now depends on how small, and there's regional banks and senior lenders and traditional banks, and as the deals get bigger, you can get into different lending institutions that will lend you sort of tranches of capital that are called mezzanine finance, which is they'll take a little bit more risk to lend, but their interest rates are a little bit higher. But I don't want to get into that. I'm just going to leave that sort of broad right now. Most banks traditionally will lend you somewhere in the neighborhood of, in businesses that size, 3 to 4 times that net income number. So they may come back to you and say, okay, Ross, you want to buy the business. We want you to put up 10% of the sales price. So on a $500,000, you've got to come up with $50,000. And most scrappy entrepreneurs that really want to get that, they're going to be able to find ways to pull together $50,000, whether it's friends and family, whether it's another credit facility, what have you. Maybe they have to take a second mortgage on their house. They put their life into it because they want to go for it. So you'd have to come up with some of that equity in the deal. And then they would come forward and they say, okay, well, this is what we'd provide. And you if you can't get all the way there, because maybe they're only going to lend you, let's say it's 3 times. So maybe you get, 300,000 towards that 500,000, and you had to put up 50,000. So let's say you're three. Now you're not all the way there. Well, you don't have enough money. So what do? Does the deal die? What you can do is you got to go back to the seller and say, look, I'm a responsible owner. I've got a great vision for it. I'm going to be a great shepherd for your business. I'm a great candidate for you to pass the baton to. I don't have a lot of capital. This is how much capital I can put into the deal, which is a banking requirement. This is how much the bank will lend based on your financials of the business. So this is the cash component. That's the maximum cash component that we can bring to the table. But we're $150,000 short. So seller, I'm going to ask you to hold a note. It's called a seller carry. I want you to hold a note for $150,000, and you got to negotiate that note. I want you to hold it for 10 years, and I want to pay interest for the first year only while I get my feet wet in the new business, and then we'll pay it off. You may come back and say, oh, 10 years is too long. I'll give you 5 years, and I'll give you the first year interest, and the second year I want you to start paying principal. So I want interest in principal. And you may say, okay, great, that gets the deal done. But what you have to do is make sure that the cash that's being thrown off from the business is enough cash to service both those pieces of debt, the bank and the seller carry. And so it's almost 100% financed, other than the amount of capital that the bank requires you to put in there. So you just acquired this business that's throwing off $100,000 a year. You've got to service $350,000 a year, which, you know, at today's rates at 3-4% is something that you'll be able to do. Plus his other seller subordinated other note of $150,000. That's going to have an interest rate that you'll be able to do. So you'll be able to service the debt and also extract capital from the company to be able to, you know, sustain yourself. So it's a win-win world. Now it's up to you as the entrepreneur, as the operator, to run a tight ship, make sure you can service your debt, and make sure you can grow that company so that you can eventually take those pieces of debt out where you don't have to service any more capital, and all that capital is yours. So that's just I would say, a quick little snapshot of a potential plan to acquire a business for an entrepreneur that's not cash rich.